I loved to tell my stories. Stories of sex and mirth. A life untouched by tragedy before my harsh rebirth. The first time that I MMF'd, I was but sweet 19, not the seduced innocent, but the seductive queen. At 24, I loved a guy I'd met just minutes before on a pier in Barbados under the sunset. But that's not all. His father had been with us. He watched our bags with glee. I never did see him again, but he's still a part of me. But the last few years have not been so. My stories now tales of woe are more of talk of God now and of my own sorrow. So buckle up, my lovelies. This may be tough for you, but just let me assure you that all I say is true. This is the story of what happens when an autistic girl is misunderstood, when trauma is compounded with trauma, and when coping mechanisms are considered insanity. People tell me I should accept what happened because it is not just me. It is precisely because it is not just me that I will not stay silent. When they won't let you be normal, they make people insane. Our story starts in 2016. I had recently separated from my husband, a man I had loved since childhood. Meeting at 4, parting at 8, and pining for 20 years till we were together again. I lost him to my best friend, a girl who, like him, enjoyed gardening and watching TV, two things I never had an aptitude for. Part of me thought they were better suited than us, and more of me thought it might be a temporary separation needed for long-term happiness. A chance to work on myself, to become a version of myself worthy of his best self, and a time for him to realize what a shit he was too. The last year had not been good, characterized by deathly silent glares from him and tumultuous moods from me, triggered by my own insecurities and knowledge that I was losing my diamond. Free from the stress of the relationship, I felt a new lease of life, and it was time to live my best one, starting, of course, with a dating profile. A true and frank description of who I was in April 2016. A woman who understood her strengths and her flaws. Hi, hello, hi, I'm Poppy. I'm incredibly smart. I'm a satellite engineer. I'm a very successful amateur model. I'm a nice person, and I will do what I can for the people I care about. I judge on the person, not the past. I know how to have fun. I can learn to do anything I put my mind to, and I'm quite possibly the best lay you'll ever have. I'm also a complete and utter nut job who doesn't know when to quit. I don't know my left from my right. I can't spell for toffee. I struggle to spell toffee. I need everything to be just right and simultaneously am incapable of keeping a place tidy. I will drink wine at 9 a.m. and tea at midnight. I will forget to eat. I am incapable of lying to save people's feelings, though I am working on this. I am impatient, prone to stress, and quite possibly bipolar. I didn't think back then I actually was bipolar, but it sounded funnier than autistic, and it was what my husband was accusing me of. Extrovert me is wonderful. Extrovert me is the one I want the world to see, because extrovert me makes people happy and gives me wonderful stories of Muppetness to tell. But in reality, I'm an introverted nerd who loves being on her own. If you think you can handle me, it would be nice to have some company on my mission to make the world a better place. I can promise you one thing. It won't be easy, but it will be fabulous. And fabulous it was going to be. I was going to be the best version of me. My mission to make the world a better place was called Operation Guardian Angel, and it comprised looking out for people, kicking work's butt, and BDSM adventures, all documented in a book. A modern Bridget Jones comes 50 Shades of Grey done right. I intended to live a full and impeccable life, navigating heartbreak and autism with hard work and hard lovers, not meds and meditation, and document it as the Nerd's Guide to Living. An insane idea, but one that would be fun and keep me occupied. Of course, I knew I was insane. It ever was the way. But never did I mean to find so much anger, nor such pain. But love hurts, planes, flies, lullabies. Your love destroyed my soul. And now I need my medicine, because in a world of untold lies, truth hurts, judgment dies. Deranged and random, messed up thoughts, 3 a.m. waffling, trying. Oh, the loss. My separation happened to coincide with the Brexit vote, which I was deeply affected by. The xenophobic, uneducated bullies had won, but the optimist in me thought that maybe this could be the start of an expert revolution, because it had seriously pissed off anybody academic in the country. And maybe, just maybe, if the nerds like me could find our voice, we could turn it into something good. I didn't want to weave a web. I didn't want to change the world. I didn't want to scream and shout or turn my body inside out. I wanted just the quiet life. To have a job and be a wife. To maybe have a kid or two and spend my life alone with Hugh. But life is strange and sticks and stones. Despite them, words will break your bones. But words can change a life around and put your feet back on the ground. And words with nothing left to lose. You have a life. You live. You choose. And now I choose my soul to bear. At least I'll try. At least I care. I didn't think a database and diary of my sultry life would change the world. Well, I kinda did. But I thought they might put me where I wanted to be. I was sectioned before I got past the first chapter. It has been 8 years since then. I have been sectioned 7 times. My career has stalled and my mind unraveled so much that I have felt I have been visited by angels, which was somewhat of a surprise for agnostic little me. I have been desperate enough to buy medication from the dark web. Do not recommend, very slow delivery times. I have lashed out and pushed people away as I have tried to hold on to a shred of sanity, all the while under the watchful gaze of the mental health services, who caused a wound and refused to let it heal. If you could see my scars, you'd know I'd been betrayed. If you could see my scars, you'd know that I'd been flayed. You'd hide your kids away. You'd tell them, babe, don't look. She's so very damaged, some kind of hidden crook. If you could see my scars, you'd turn yourself away, hiding your repulse, unsure of what to say. But you can't see my scars. So let us play pretend until the scarring heals. All right, in the end. The dating profile was popular and attracted a man whose sexual fantasies matched my own, and who, like me, seemed to have a belief that things were not over and have a plan of action, though he would not tell me what it was. We had the best, most debauched first date ever, and I wanted more. But he wanted me to say that my plan would succeed. It was a good plan, and I was excited for the future. But all I could say was I would try. Plus, to prove my confidence, or just to indulge his own perversions, he wanted me to get a stranger to take naked photos of me to send to him. At the time, I modeled nude frequently, so nudity was not a problem. But involving an innocent in my sex life? That was a hard no. As we battled back and forwards, I had my first ever 4-day bender at the age of 34. No sleep, no drugs either. A lot of drink and a lot of desire. Seeing the world through new eyes, I experienced firsthand how powerful sleazy people can sense a person in distress and hone in on them in seconds. I often frequented bars on my own, and I never experienced any hassle. Never until a guy I liked tried to push me to do something I didn't want to do, and I became a bit unhinged. My sex drive going through the roof, wanting more than I got. As I was traipsing down to Ashford to try and see the guy, I stopped in an O'Neill's for a burger and a pint. Immediately, a coked-up CEO descended on me, offering me cigarettes and buying me drinks, feeling me up outside and inviting me to party. And I was so sexually charged that I let it happen for a while. All the time I am thinking, this is what happens to homeless women. I was not a homeless woman, and I got away easily after I tried to convince him we'd be better off talking over a game of pool, and I had the key to his relationship problems. I know, nuts, right? The adventures continued until on day 4, I had a date I'd forgotten about with a guy who turned out to be a creep, who exacerbated my out-of-control sex drive rather than abated it, and who I was sure was capable of rape. I kicked off in the pub, deranged and sleep-deprived, and was arrested for drunken disorderly. I had seen how easy it was to spiral, and how many predators are just waiting for a chance to prey. I was a rabbit on a date with the fox, and the police were the RSPCA. I act like the predator, but I am the prey. Don't ask me why. God made me that way. If they had called the mental health services on me that day, it would have made sense. I would have gone with them willingly. I was scared and confused and also elated. But they didn't. They threw me in a cell and left me to scream and scream until all the stress and tension and fear was gone. Someone should give Chris, the second lieutenant at Stevenage Police Station, a medal. After screaming my guts out all night, he calmly and caringly walked me through the process of having my fingerprints taken. His parting words to me were, "Don't worry, a lot of people who go on to do amazing things have records for drunk and disorderly." I felt seen and supported. I'd got this guy and my ex out of my system, It was time to start excelling and do those amazing things. Fun over mess over, buckle down and work. 6 days till the pitch, this isn't time to twerk. Do that on Saturday, your amazing photo shoot. Buckle down, make them proud, give the pass the boot. I had gone to my parents' rural house the days after the arrest, on the express promise that they'd drive me home by 1 o'clock the next day, in time for a dear friend to come visit, take me to IKEA, and maybe, finally, release some of that sexual tension. But while my mind was clear, I was still hella horny. I had a disrupted night's rest, and they reneged on the promise by allowing me to oversleep. When I woke up at the time we were due to leave, I was frazzled. My friend was driving 200 miles to come see me, and I wasn't going to be there. They were fussing about tea and breakfast, and I was begging them to get going. Please, we can have breakfast the other end. You promised. They called a doctor on me. I freaked and ran from the house, and from them, I called the police for a lift. Should have called a taxi, in hindsight. The police came, the doctor came. I spoke to both of them and felt it was all resolved. They asked if I would go to A&E for a quick checkup. A quick checkup that took 24 hours and ended with my incarceration. I trusted you. You brought me up, but troubles dogged your life. So I would never bother you with my own grief and strife. I hid my fire and passion, putting your needs first. But life and pain and suffering made my heart about to burst. And then one day, I needed you to help rebuild my life. But rather than encourage me, you raised the chopping knife. I'd always been a good girl. You loved that I was kind. But seeing my ambition drove you out your fucking mind. I didn't mean to scare you. You'd never seen the flame. No wonder you were worried, just history to blame. But honestly, how could you? I didn't ask for much, just a little understanding and a parent's tender touch. I do not blame you, parents. I know you truly care, but nothing's ever hurt as much as that you did there. It wasn't all your fault, though. You never could have known the sexism of mental health that chilled me to the bone. I say sexism because I believe that had I been male, that ambition and actively seeking sex would not have given them cause for concern. In my assessment, my work proposal was noted as an idea of grandeur. My promiscuity and belief that I was widely liked as vulnerability, and the words did not admit to drug use, for the drugs I did not take really irked me. The doctors spent more time talking to my parents than they did to me. To this day, I wish I had only given them permission to talk to us together. I was left with a woman who looked at me with tears in her eyes as I begged her to get them back so I could explain further. She just stood there crying while I was begging and dying. She just stood there crying while my inner soul was torn. She just stood there crying while I was begging and dying. He just stood there crying, voyeur of pain. From the moment I was sectioned, I became convinced that the way that mental health is handled in A&E drives homelessness. I felt like running and risking it all on the streets. I almost did. I had everything to lose and feel and know that people with less than me would do it. I was taken to Radlett Ward. It is one of the most modern in the country, but what it had in terms of courtyards and individual en-suite rooms, it lacked in facilities, staffing, and most distressingly, anything to do. The bookshelves were almost empty, notably except for a copy of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, a book and author that should never be allowed in a mental ward. There were a series of incomplete puzzles and some fairly basic games, and that was it. The staff were frankly terrifying, and no one would explain to me why I was there. A question that none of the patients seemed to have an answer to. Scared, I wondered if this guy had pushed me too far on purpose so I could see the horror. Feeling like an expose was needed, I kept notes of what I saw and felt on paper towels. An old lady screams out, "I know what I did! I know what I did! I'm in the worst place in the world!" She spots a nurse passing and instantly shuts down and stops. So apparently, my behavior is manic. I call it driven. When you want something a lot, it becomes important. When something is important, you become emotionally attached. You cry and scream when stuff gets in the way of your goals. A lady is sat at the end of the corridor, screaming that I don't want to be in these places anymore. Just knock me out. I'm tired of being treated like a fucking guinea pig. I just want to go home. I don't care anymore. And the woman who all she wants is a fucking cigarette, who is hurting herself by slamming herself against the walls, who at the same time as screaming is apologizing for screaming. I'm sorry. I don't want to shout at you. I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want any more bruises. All I want is a cigarette so I can sit in the garden and calm down. Is that too much to ask? Well, is it? There was a courtyard right there, and yet no permission to have that one cigarette. A legal human right. The smoking laws in mental wards being the main reason the wards kick off, and something that is despised by staff and patients alike. They let me out after 3 nights with no meds and no diagnosis. That might have been it. I was horrified by what I'd seen, but it had been an interesting and eye-opening experience. I had seen segments of society I had no knowledge of before. An apology was all I needed to make it okay. We're sorry. We made a mistake. You're fine. But that wasn't what happened. The guy at my discharge meeting looked at me like I was indeed deranged and had got out on a technicality. And more distressingly, work, which I loved, which I had a time-limited proposal for, wouldn't let me come back, insisting that I was ill and needed time off. It was also the end of my marriage. From the day I was sectioned, my ex-husband, who had been bombarding me with messages, stopped communicating. And with no communication, there is no future. Oh, Why am I still here, Lord? I died so long ago. Why'd you make me tread this world, Lord, trapped in death's sorrow? The endless onward grind, Lord, when I've already peaked, that time you took my soul and put me back upon my feet. I walk this world in silence, a pain I can't repress, wishing that death would take me. Let my fake smile rest. Left without any footholds, over the next few weeks, I spiraled until after a frustrating work meeting where I was once again denied a return to the office on a weekend in Bootle, I first experienced extreme psychosis and maybe nearly died. My frustrations were doubled by my gorgeous, heavy-drinking friend disapproving of a guy I liked, purely on the basis of him having a coke habit, while she was hooking up with a guy that had a partner, which is behavior I couldn't abide. With the stress and the booze, things were starting to get weird. I was sensing her dead parents in the hallway and feeling like I was unraveling a universal theory on human psychology. Knowing that I was in desperate need of sobering up and fast, I started pounding the streets on a hunt for cocaine. Cocaine? Sober? It counteracts the effects of alcohol and it would have helped. I had, however, never bought drugs before, and I was terrible at it. Frustrated, I gave some random people 60 quid and left empty-handed. By the time the ambulance arrived, I was apologizing for the torrential rain that I was sure I was the cause of. The hospital I was taken only existed as far as I could see it. I was building it with my mind, and it was perfect. People kept telling me I was at Liverpool Hospital, but I could have been anywhere, another realm. I begged the staff who seemed to appear and disappear with my thoughts not to let me die, and they assured me I would not. But at one point, walking towards the most beautiful sunset I have ever seen, the clothes I was wearing started transforming from a badly fitted jeans and t-shirt outfit to a gorgeous scarlet red dress. At this point, the psychosis was too much. Your clothes do not just transform themselves in the human realm. Withdrawing from the illusion, I stumbled and collapsed onto the nearest hospital bed. The staff kept telling me I needed to sleep, but I felt that if I slept without eating, I would cease to exist. I begged them for a drip, and they told me they'd installed one, but I could neither see nor feel it. So I could not sleep, and the psychosis continued to build till I could sense what I felt was the devil. Who is he? The one I close my eyes and see. The one who's always there but never comes, who beats the sound of knocking drum. Raggy doll, why do I let you in? You're the serpent, the snake I want within. The snake that slithers up my thighs and promises me paradise. The serpent fills my loins with lust. Resist! Resist his silky touch and push him back into the dust, but I can feel, and it's left a stain, a nest of darkness planted deep, ready to burst through my body, seep. The snakes invade and turn my hair to blazing flame. They'd win if I was on my own. Temptations inside every bone. I'd cave, I'd crawl, I'd scream, I'd moan, I'd find you under every stone. But I I'm stronger than you think. And time will soothe with every blink. Not alone I will survive, the thoughts inside will soon subside. I do not gripe about this second sectioning the same way I do about the first. Because, unlike the first time, my thoughts and minds were unraveled. But by the time I had survived the night in the hospital, it was over. And a month locked up with no one talking to me about what had happened just made the trauma worse. I was charged with no crime. Yes, I had been a drain on the NHS and tried to commit a crime, but one time dangerously drunk in my life, days after my dreams had yet again been shattered, is not too bad. I was detained for a month, and then merely weeks after release, detained again, this time being brought in by the police, having been caught trying to steal a can of Red Bull and a pint of milk at the end of another bizarre day. What, though, would I have got through the courts of law for that? A slap on the wrist? Probably not even a fine. I certainly wouldn't have been locked up for 4 weeks. 4 weeks of sitting and waiting with no therapy and no explanation. I'm like a warrior, poised for battle, sitting, waiting, sitting, thinking, knowing that I might die, weary from the war already fought, thinking this might be the time I don't come back, sitting, waiting, sitting, thinking, ready, planning. It's been so long, it's been so hard, the battle's fought, the battle's lost, the glimmer of hope, here we go, over the top, one last push, fight, onward, stand. Shot down. I haven't seen my section notes for any time except the first, despite repeated requests for access. Apparently, they don't like to show them to people in case it triggers a reaction. I say that no one is triggered by the truth, and part of your job as a psychiatric doctor is to be able to have these tough conversations. It was the second time that I received my bipolar diagnosis, though to me it felt like an autistic overload. There was no discussion of the diagnosis. I didn't even know I had it until a letter arrived in the post. I continuously tried to convince the services that autism, which I had self-diagnosed years prior, was a better fit, but they refused to even acknowledge it. So don't tell me that you're helping, when your help is nothing thus, when your help is only punishment, nothing based on trust. And don't tell me that you're helping when you can't do the simplest thing. If you will not get me my laptop, maybe some nice long string. And don't tell me that you're helping when you're watching your own back while mine is all red, raw and bleeding and my heart's set to crack. And don't tell me you don't see them. The hopeless, disenchanted mass. The ones that no more struggle, just lie upon the grass. And don't tell me you can't see it. The constant pain behind their eyes. The sparkles with a gleam like raindrops when someone stops, says hi. So do not make me say it, for you will not accept my words. Just let me lick my wounds in peace and somehow make it through at least. And don't tell me that you're helping, when your help is nothing thus, when your help is only punishment, no place to lay my trust. It is meant to be, or generally accepted, that to be sectioned, you must be a danger to yourself or others. But they have a clever catch-all of, or has a medical condition that needs to be managed in hospital, that allows you to be taken with little justification if you are known to the services. And this leads to fear and despair. I once read that there are approximately 300 deaths in mental wards a year, though recent reports suggest the number could be higher. That isn't just unfortunate. That is a disgrace. And that number does not include the most dangerous time, which is known to be shortly after release. If 300 people were going into hospital a year with broken legs and coming out paralyzed, there would be outcry. Yet time and again, the suicides in mental wards are simply discounted as people with complex mental health needs or hidden in the back pages of the newspaper, though this is encouragingly starting to change. The amount of stress the services put you under whilst commanding you to avoid stress would be comical if it were not deadly. There is no criterion for release. There is no way to get a diagnosis wiped from your record. If you are depressed or anxious, you can recover. But if you are bipolar or schizophrenic, you are considered that for life. The first time I was sectioned, they discharged me from the services the minute I was released. After the third, they would not. For 2.5 years, I went to meetings wondering desperately what I could do to make them believe I was okay and achieve discharge. They kept asking if I felt better. There was no description of better, no criteria for what a healthy mind was, just better. And all I could think was that better was how I was that first time they sectioned me and took everything I'd worked my life for from. It took 2.5 years for work to offer me a project lead again. And it was 2.5 years later when my risky choice of boyfriend tried to kill me. And when being under the services did nothing but result in my detention and his release. There were witnesses. Yeah, I was locked up for a month while he walked free. From there, any wonder became deathly serious, and a deep melancholy and not being in control of my own life overtook me. I sit here, and I hate myself. I don't want meds. I don't want help. It used to be a better day before they sectioned that away. Before they stripped me of my soul, spent weeks and months and years convincing me that I was ill, that I was wrong, somehow undone. I drank too much. I screwed too much. Somehow my brain just didn't work. Funny that I have to think. It always had been fine. I'd got my grades. I'd done my job. I always had performed, and crucially upon it all, I liked my deranged mind. And now there's anger in my soul, a pain I can't abide, a hardness and a broken heart, an innocence destroyed. The hardest thing I found about being sectioned was that everyone believes you deserved it. And that is true of the legal system too, for you cannot sue against a decision to be sectioned. There is no, I was sane, please let me explain route. I went back to a man I knew had the capacity for violence because he was the only person who didn't treat me like I was ill, but like a survivor with real, achievable goals and ambitions. He used to send me off to work with the phrase, go be a woman who means business in business. And he wanted a kid. a cute cottage, and a happy family life as much as I did. We clashed because he was very monogamous and I was an ex-poly swinger kid, and while I was prepared to be monogamous for him, I wasn't prepared to renounce the lifestyle or my friends from the scene. But I really did want the quiet life. You ask me for my fantasies. I say the quiet life, with a nice clean house and gardening, with baking instead of strife. I've been there now. I've done it. I've done near everything. So let me tell you of the things that would cause my heart to sing. I want to bake a pretty cake, maybe a rainbow one, with colored eyes and sprinkles, and a bow that I have done. I'd like to plant some daffodils in bright, delightful pots, and maybe a thriving herb patch. I would like that, lots and lots. I dream of chores not being chores. The hoover, dust and mop, and maybe even ironing, the housework that God forgot. And as the evening hours lengthen, I'll scribble, draw, and write, give the little cat a cuddle, and make a tasty bite. I'd like to bake a fancy flan, maybe a hot pot for the main. When I tell you of my fantasies, they're really most mundane. Of course, I like the passion. A party's always fun, but I would like the wholesome life. Now all that's done is done. The rest of the world just tentatively asked, "How are you?" every 2 minutes. And fine was never an acceptable answer. This narrative that you must not accept fine as an answer from friends who have previously been depressed keeps people in the past and focused on their trauma. Like your recovery has to be at an acceptable rate for the people around you. I strongly believe that true recovery from illness born from trauma is possible. But you have to allow people to experience joy, to be stupid at times, and to not talk about it if they do not want to. For they will when they do. Conversely, chasing happiness can be disastrous. In a wondrous world, Julie screamed. The essence had run dry. Where once was joy and butterflies, now seemed like dust and dirt and lies. With chafed bare hands and battered knees, she scratched the arid earth, digging deeply, frantically, a small puddle to unturf. For Julie found that if she found some water underground, she could renew the arid earth, and life and beauty would abound. But nothing came but lice and stones, and clouds of swirling black. Her tears the only liquid here, the bright sun burning on her back. The memories of sweet release, of frolic, fun, and friends, of dappled dew and lily pads, of woodlands, fields, dunes, and fens. These urged her onwards, deeper down. So desperately she dug, not heeding any pleas to wait, she traveled further through the mud. The small oasis Julie found was many feet below the ground, quite cut off from the world above, a shallow joy of broken love. And then the rains began to fall. The water flowed down the walls. But nothing good this deep could grow, and impatient souls lost shadow. The raindrops splashed her face and neck and stung and laughed at her distress. She screamed and clawed and tried to climb, but was too deep down the mine. The arid earth began to bloom. Swallows, daisies, sweet perfume. Lush grass and verdant meadows too, pools and tadpoles, a life anew. And as the world above rebound, Julie was nowhere to be found. A pitiful and hollow sound. Alas, in the well, Julie drowned. Bipolar is a common misdiagnosis for autism, and something I do not recognize from my youth. Sure, I had been depressed, but manic highs were not something I knew. I'd known my brain was different from a young age, and when I discovered autism, I felt that I had found the explanation. For 3 years, I tried to convince the services I was autistic. For 3 years, they would not believe me. I got a private diagnosis. The word severely autistic shined at me from the pages of the report, and I was armed and ready to take it to my psychiatrist. I just had to get one thing finished at work first, and boy, did that go badly. A terrifying sectioning followed, and they finally sent me for an NHS assessment after my 5th release, which of course came back positive. I should not have had to have been noticeably autistic before I was believed. And even after the diagnosis, it was not given any credence. I had hoped they would reassess the bipolar in light of the autism, but they did not. And it wasn't even on my medical notes. The 6th time I was taken to the hospital. In an effort to heal myself, I attempted to get private trauma therapy. And this is funny, I was turned down by 3 separate trauma specialists the minute I mentioned the word section for having too much trauma and requiring a whole team of doctors and psychiatrists. Too much trauma? For trauma therapy? Struggling on my own, I used alcohol to numb my brain. I'd always liked to drink, but this was different. I now no longer drank with friends, but on my own, drinking to just feel okay. I tried to confide in a friend that I thought I'd developed a problem, to which she simply told me that I couldn't have, because I didn't buy 2 bottles of wine and go straight back to bed like her aunt does. I smiled and nodded, but inside I wanted to scream, "Don't say I'm not a drinker." For that, I really am. The outward face of sobriety, for that one is the sham. For when I'm on my own, it's all I think about. The luscious golden liquor that takes away my doubt, that lets me just forget, that leads to fitful rest, that takes the days asunder and clears them off my chest. Don't say I'm not a drinker, for I drink every day. I don't know how to carry on. I cannot stay this way. Don't say I'm not a drinker, but take my hand and laugh and tell me we will change this, that I am on the right path. For sure I will defeat this. I'll do my very best. But now I'd like some vodka and fitful, awful rest. After losing my 2 dearest friends from the course of my life in the space of 1 week, a disturbingly regular occurrence of that period, my happiness reached rock bottom, and I became properly suicidal for the first time. I kind of knew I wouldn't do anything, but for the first time I didn't know, and I felt unsafe being on my own. I begged the services for medication, anything to take the edge off, but they will not prescribe antidepressants to someone with a bipolar diagnosis in case it triggers a manic episode. Desperate, I took to sourcing my own medication from the dark web, nothing I hadn't been prescribed before. I would also invite strangers to my house because being with a stranger was safer than being on my own. And by this time, I had precious few friends I could call on. I dreamt of comfort and being in a place where I was not the most messed up person in the room. So I'll wander to the crack den, because that's where my pain ends. I thought it'd be a happy day. I thought I'd make amends. I booked a nice hotel suite. I thought I would treat myself, but there's no one here to share it. I'll stay here by myself. So I'll wander to the crack den. Maybe that'll ease my pain. That all the friends I still cherish do not feel for me the same. I'd walk many a country mile. I'd knock right on their door. If that was what was called for, I'd even do way more. But I invite them round for dinner or just a cup of tea. And everyone's too busy to see me. So I'll wander to the crack den and drink the cheap red wine and drown away my sorrows until they think I'm fine. It may take many moons. It may take many years to alleviate the terror, to soothe the constant fears. I've smartened up the terrace. The place is looking tight, but there's no one here to visit me. Well, isn't that just right? So I'll wander to the crack den, because that's where my pain ends. I thought it'd be a happy day. I thought I'd make amends. Both psychoactive medication and recreational drugs work to alter the brain chemistry, whether on a long-term or short-term basis. A huge area of difficulty I faced was being expected to process my psychological pain sober, whilst knowing that the people requiring that behavior were out raving themselves. The last time I was sectioned was next level crazy. Completely off the charts. This time I was not upset about being in a hospital, as I desperately needed to be there. I'd even tried to get myself committed a few days prior by calling an ambulance on myself 3 times, only to be asked if I knew how many times I'd called with no response. I had been conversing with angels in human form. Huge ones, too. If God exists, he's kinky. On the day it happened, I almost got myself murdered by trying to kick down the angry guy on the estate's door after mistaking him for the reincarnation of Job from the Bible, to which he responded angrily with a hammer. I wanted to be in hospital. I needed to be in hospital. The minute I was there under section rather than as a voluntary patient, though, I was furious. And my sole aim came to be to get out as quickly as possible. The difference between being respected to know your own mental health and deemed incapable, possibly being the difference between life and death, between engagement and outrage, as the struggle to be understood can feel insurmountable, and the only way out can seem to be to do something drastic. Do they want a suicide note? Because I've got one, 300 pages long. No, I don't want to die. I want to cruise the Caribbean, have lovers around the world. I want to laugh, sing, dance, and push my career to its limits. But when they stop me, when they tell me I can't have the life I had, if they tell me I can't laugh at myself, at you, at life, I want to stab myself in the head, carve slot into my arm, and slit my throat in front of them. And they can't say I never told them why. I've been trying to for years. But then I would just be another statistic. And I feel the better option is to feed back. I took this show to Edinburgh last year, and from it came opportunities to talk to mental health professionals about my experiences. It has not all been plain sailing, but the last 18 months have been a revolutionary turnaround. And the last ward stay was the first time I found a ward a help rather than a hindrance. I have still never had a mental health professional talk to me about my weird psychotic experiences. And I have a concerning belief in the supernatural these days. I even attend church occasionally, which I'm very uncomfortable with, but it is what it is. This is a story for all the people who are still in the wards with a hope to be part of the narrative for their improvement. All the people who blew too hard. In a forest far away, a little girl began to blow. She blew so hard she moved the trees and brought them crashing to their knees. She did not mean to, but she did. And what was done was not undid. She blew so hard she puffed with fright and ran off screaming to the night. Within the darkness, she could not see the scary quest of destiny. She hid among the shadow beasts and gorged with plenty at their feast. Her head was clear, her heart divine, but something tingled in her spine. She knew this way she could not stay, and someday soon she'd face the day. The sun would rise and cast anew a carnage that she knew she blew. She ran and hid and closed her eyes, but nature saw beneath the lies. Nature saw her inner soul, all ripped and torn, a gaping hole. A hole that could not fill itself, a hole too large for just one elf. She stumbled and she dared to move, 1 foot then 2, she faced the blue. She saw the pain around her go and started some new seeds to sow. What once was waste began to bloom, but days were short and night too soon. If only night could become day, the world could live another way. Then out of darkness sprang the light, a communal zone of such delight, a sanctuary to call her own with others who had blown and blown. And flowers came and friends appeared, and one by one they calmed her fears. The faceless few became a mass, and darkness ran and hid and gasped. The sun shone down upon her face, all painted red with her disgrace. But not alone she had new strength, a world that now would not be drenched. Thank you. That is the end of the show. I have been Poppy Radcliffe. The only thing left to say is I have copies of my poetry collection sectioned if anyone is interested for a fiver. The show is free, but if you feel like giving me a donation, I never say no to free money. And I've got one more show this evening at 7, so if you had liked it and you can round anyone up for the last show, that would be brilliant. Thank you. I'm delighted to have put you through that trauma. I hope you'll go and see something funny now. Thank you. I'll be at the back.